I first heard my own voice begging for help 2 days before I realized I was the one who hadn't come back. The recording came through my landline, which should have been impossible. I hadn't used that phone for anything except the occasional call from my sister and the automated pharmacy reminders. No voicemail, no message service. Just a dusty plastic receiver on a small table by the hallway. That night, a little after 12:30 a.m., it rang anyway. The sound didn't startle me at first. Took a second to register because it didn't sound urgent. It was steady, patient, like it had been ringing for a while and would keep ringing as long as it needed to. I was still awake in my living room, half asleep in my chair, the television muttering quietly to itself. The wind had been up all evening, pushing against the trees behind my house, making the old siding creak now and then. The kind of night where everything outside feels bigger and emptier than it should. I got up and picked up the receiver. Hello. At first, there was only silence. Then I heard breathing. Not close breathing. Not into the phone. It sounded distant, like someone standing in a large room, or maybe outside. Slow, controlled breaths, spaced just a little too evenly. Hello, I said again. Still no answer. Then, faintly, I heard something else. A soft crunching sound, like boots on gravel. A few steps. A pause. More steps. My skin prickled. Is someone there? I asked. The breathing stopped. The line went dead. I stood there for a moment, holding the receiver, listening to nothing. Eventually I told myself it was a wrong number, or crossed lines, or some glitch in the old phone system. Things like that happen, especially out here. I live alone, about 10 miles outside a small Pennsylvania town, in a house that backs up to a stretch of state forest. The infrastructure is old. So are most of the people. Still, I didn't put the receiver back right away. When I did, the red voicemail light was blinking. That shouldn't have been possible. I stared at it for a few seconds, then pressed the button. The machine clicked, word, and played a message. A man's voice came through the speaker. Quiet, tense, trying very hard to stay calm. If anyone gets this, I'm not supposed to be here. I think I followed the wrong trail. My phone keeps losing signal. I can hear someone walking around my truck, but I don't see anyone. If this sends, tell my Wi-Fi. The message cut off. I sat down hard in the hallway chair. The voice sounded familiar. Not in a way I could place right away, but in that uncomfortable way where your brain keeps circling something it doesn't want to recognize. I checked the timestamp. The message had been left 2 minutes earlier. I didn't recognize the number. And even if I had, it shouldn't have been able to leave a voicemail on that phone. I slept badly that night. Every time the wind shifted outside, I thought I heard footsteps on gravel. In the morning, I called my sister and told her about it, trying to laugh it off. She suggested it was a scam or a prank. Maybe someone had the wrong number. Maybe the voicemail system glitched. Did the voice sound like anyone you know? She asked. No, I said a little too quickly. After I hung up, I went outside and stood at the edge of my property, looking at the tree line. There's an old logging road back there, barely visible now, mostly reclaimed by weeds and moss. It hasn't been used in decades, not officially. Sometimes hikers wander through during the day. Hunters, too, in season. I worked for the county utilities department for over 30 years before I retired. I know most of the service roads, the access points, the forgotten little spurs that don't show up on modern maps anymore. Something about that voicemail kept pulling at me. By mid-morning, I was in my truck, driving toward the state forest. I told myself I was just being cautious, that if someone really was lost out there, maybe I could spot something. A broken-down vehicle, a trail marker knocked over, anything. I didn't tell myself the other thing. The part about the voice sounding too much like mine. I parked near one of the old maintenance gates and walked in a little way, sticking to the edge of the road. The woods were quiet in that deep, heavy way they get when there's no wind. No birds, no insects, just the sound of my own boots and my breathing. About a quarter mile in, I saw tire tracks. They were fresh, cut deep into the soft dirt, leading off the road and into the trees. I followed them until they stopped. No turnaround marks. No signs of anyone getting out. No footprints leading away, just tracks that went into the woods and ended. I stood there longer than I should have, staring at the empty space between the trees, waiting for something to make sense. Nothing did. That night, the phone rang again. This time, I didn't answer it right away. I watched it from my chair, the red light blinking, the sound echoing in the quiet house. When I finally picked up, there was no breathing. There was wind, and underneath it, very faintly, a voice. "Hello." It sounded far away, strained. I swallowed. "Yes, I'm here." There was a pause. Then, "I can't find the road. It's darker than it should be. The lights don't—" The voice cut out, came back. "Don't match the map anymore." My heart was pounding. "Who is this?" Another pause. "This is Mark," the voice said. "That's my name." "Where are you?" I asked. "I don't know," the voice said. "That's the problem." The line went dead. The voicemail light blinked again. This time, I didn't listen to it until morning. When I did, the message was different. Clearer. Longer. It was me. "I think I followed the wrong trail," my voice said through the speaker. "Everything looks familiar, but it doesn't line up. My truck is still running, but the radio only plays static. I can hear someone walking around it, but every time I look, there's nothing there. If anyone gets this, tell Linda I'm sorry I took the long way home." Linda is my late wife's name. She's been dead for 8 years. I didn't go back into the woods after that. I told myself there was a rational explanation. Someone using recordings. Some elaborate prank. Stress. Lack of sleep. But the calls kept coming. Always after midnight. Sometimes it was just breathing. Sometimes it was wind and distant footsteps. Once, I heard my name whispered so close to the receiver it made my ear ache. I unplugged the phone. The voicemail light still blinked. On the 5th night, I listened to a message that ended differently. "I see the house now," my voice said. "The lights are on inside. That's good. That means I made it back." I was sitting in the dark. All my lights were off. I didn't sleep at all after that. The next morning, I drove into town and talked to an old friend of mine who still works with the county. I didn't tell him everything. Just asked if there'd been any reports of missing persons near the forest. Any accidents. Any abandoned vehicles. He looked at me strangely and said, "Not officially." "Not officially?" I asked. "There was a truck found off one of the old roads 2 days ago," he said. "No plates. No driver. Still warm when they found it, apparently. Like someone had just walked away." My mouth felt dry. Did they run the VIN? Couldn't. Plates were gone. And the number inside was scratched out. I drove home in silence. That night, the phone didn't ring. The voicemail light was already blinking when I walked into the hallway. I pressed play. This time, the message was short. "I'm standing in the kitchen," my voice said. "But the house is empty. I don't understand how that's possible." I stood very still. Then I heard something behind me, a soft sound, like boots on gravel, coming from the direction of the back door. The blood was already drying when I found the bus, and that's how I knew whatever had happened. I was too late to stop it. It was 3:47 a.m. and County Route 12 wasn't supposed to have any traffic that night. The road only gets used when storms flood the main highway or when there's a long-term closure somewhere else. Even then, most drivers avoid it. Too narrow, too dark, too much forest pressing in on both sides. I'd been driving night routes for nearly 15 years. I'm 61 now, and I know every sound a bus makes when something isn't right. I also know when something feels wrong before I can explain why. Dispatch had rerouted me because of a washed-out bridge. They gave me the coordinates, told me to stay alert, and then the radio went quiet. That happens sometimes. Old equipment. Dead zones. What doesn't happen is finding one of our buses sitting sideways across the road with its doors open and no driver in sight. I slowed to a stop about 20 yards away and left my headlights on it. The beam caught the front steps first. That's where I saw the blood. Not fresh. Dark, almost black. Dried into the rubber edges of the steps and smeared along the first few rows of the aisle. I radioed dispatch again. No answer. I told myself not to get out. Told myself this was something for the state police, not a tired county driver on a double shift. But the doors were open, and the engine was still ticking like it had only just been shut off. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped down onto the road. The bus looked almost exactly like mine. Same model, same faded paint, same county logo on the side. Almost. The fleet number was wrong. Ours end in even digits. This one ended in a 7. Inside, the seats were empty. No bags, no jackets, no phones, no sign of any passengers at all. Just the blood. It streaked down the aisle in long, uneven smears, like someone had been dragged toward the back. And then I saw the footprints. Bare feet. They started near the rear door and went straight out into the trees. The woods on that side of Route 12 are thick and old. The kind that swallow light and sound. Even with my flashlight, I could only see a few yards in. I stood there for a long time, telling myself I was about to do something stupid. Then I followed the prints. They didn't wander. They didn't hesitate. They went straight into the forest, as if whoever made them knew exactly where they were going. After about 30 yards, the ground opened into a small clearing. In the middle of it stood a bus stop sign. Rusty, crooked, covered in layers of old stickers and peeling paint. This route hasn't had a stop here in over 20 years. Beneath the sign, nailed to a tree, was a laminated sheet of paper. A schedule. My schedule. My name was printed at the top. Below it were the usual stops, the usual times. And at the very bottom, in smaller print, was one more line. Final pickup, 4 a.m. I checked my watch. 3:55. My radio crackled. At first, it was just static. Then a voice broke through. My voice. County Route 12, you're running a little behind, it said. Final pickup in 5 minutes. I spun around, scanning the trees. Who is this? I said into the radio. No response. Just static again. I backed out of the clearing and made my way back to my own bus as fast as I could without running. My hands were shaking when I climbed into the driver's seat. I tried dispatch again. Nothing. I tried state police. Nothing but dead air and interference. At 3:59, my headlights flickered. At 4 o'clock, the road ahead of me changed. I don't have a better word for it. The trees seemed closer. The asphalt darker. The fog thicker, even though there hadn't been any fog before. And then I saw them. People standing along the side of the road. At least a dozen of them. They weren't hitchhiking. They weren't waving. They were just standing there, facing the road perfectly still. I slowed without meaning to. They were barefoot. All of them. Their clothes were wrong. Outdated. Mismatched. Like things pulled from different decades and thrown together. And none of them looked directly at me. They were all looking at the empty stretch of road behind my bus. My radio crackled again. Doors, please, my voice said calmly. I should have driven away. Instead, I stopped. The doors hissed open. One by one, they got on. They didn't speak. They didn't look at me. They walked past in silence and sat down, filling the seats from back to front. Cold came with them. A deep, damp cold that smelled like wet leaves and old metal. When the last one sat, the doors closed on their own. I looked in the mirror. None of them had reflections. My radio clicked. Thank you, my voice said. Next stop. The bus lurched forward. I didn't remember pressing the accelerator. The road ahead was no longer Route 12. It was narrower, broken, like it hadn't been used in years. The trees leaned in, their branches scraping along the sides of the bus. In the mirror, I saw one of the passengers finally look up. He met my eyes, and I recognized him. He was the driver from the other bus. His mouth opened, and in my own voice he said, "You weren't supposed to see the schedule." The bus stopped. The engine died. The lights went out. And behind me, every passenger stood up at once. The first thing I noticed wasn't the open closet or the suitcase on the floor. It was the mirror. I was standing in the dim light of a roadside motel bathroom, staring at my own reflection. And for a few seconds, I couldn't understand why something felt wrong. My face looked tired, older than I remembered. The lines around my eyes seemed deeper. My mouth was set in a way I didn't recognize. Then I realized the reflection blinked a moment after I did. That's when I heard the toilet flush behind me. I turned around, heart slamming against my ribs, and the bathroom was empty. No one was there. The door was still closed. The lock still turned. The room was silent except for the hum of the flickering light above the sink. I told myself it was exhaustion. I'm 63 years old. I'd been on the road for 2 long days, driving back east after visiting my daughter in Arizona. My eyes burned. My shoulders ached. My head felt full of cotton. When I saw the motel sign glowing through the rain, I didn't even think about shopping around. I just pulled in. The clerk barely looked up when I checked in. The lobby smelled like old carpet and burnt coffee. He slid the key across the counter and said, "Room 17, end of the building." The room looked fine at first glance. Bed made, curtains drawn, TV off. That generic, empty feeling hotel rooms get when they're waiting for someone. I dropped my bag on the chair, kicked off my shoes, and went into the bathroom. That's when the mirror thing happened. After a minute of standing there, listening to my own breathing, I convinced myself I'd imagined it. Lack of sleep does strange things. So does too much driving in bad weather. I washed my face, turned off the light, and went back into the room. That's when I noticed the closet door wasn't quite closed. I don't remember opening it. I walked over and pulled it open. There was a suitcase inside. Old, brown, scuffed at the corners. The kind of hardshell luggage you don't see much anymore. It wasn't mine. For a moment, I just stood there, trying to understand how that was possible. Then I checked under the bed. The bathroom. The door. Everything else looked normal. I went back to the front desk. The clerk frowned at his screen when I told him. "Room 17 hasn't been occupied in weeks," he said. "You're the first guest we've had in that wing since the plumbing issue." "Then why is there luggage in my room?" I asked. He shrugged. "Probably housekeeping missed it. I'll send someone up in the morning." That didn't sit right with me, but I was too tired to argue. I went back to the room, locked the door, and sat on the bed staring at the suitcase like it might move on its own. Eventually, curiosity won. Inside were clothes that didn't fit me, a couple of shirts, jeans, a jacket that smelled faintly of damp fabric and something metallic. There was a pair of glasses in the side pocket and a paperback book with half the pages torn out. At the bottom was a notebook. The last entry was dated that morning. It read, "He keeps pretending he can't see me, but he always leaves the light on." I closed the notebook and put it back. That should have been the moment I left. Instead, I told myself it was probably some drifter stuff, or someone who'd checked out in a hurry. The motel wasn't exactly high-end. I set the suitcase back in the closet, turned off the lights, and lay down. Sleep didn't come easily. The rain kept tapping against the window. The heater rattled now and then. Every time I closed my eyes, I had the strange sense that the room was occupied. Not in a threatening way, just in the way you know someone is sitting behind you even before you hear them breathe. At some point, I drifted off. I woke up to the sound of the bathroom door closing. Soft, careful. I lay there, frozen, listening. The room was dark, but I could see the outline of the bathroom door. It was shut. I hadn't closed it. My mouth felt dry. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure whoever was in the room could hear it. "Hello," I said quietly. No answer. I reached over and turned on the bedside lamp. The room looked empty. The closet door was still closed. The bathroom door was still closed. Nothing seemed out of place. I told myself I was dreaming. I turned the light back off and tried to sleep, but I kept waking up. Every few minutes it felt like something shifted in the room. A change in the air. A subtle sound. The faintest creak of the floor. Finally, I turned on all the lights and sat on the edge of the bed, wide awake. That's when I noticed the TV remote wasn't where I'd left it. It was on the desk, facing the bed. I hadn't put it there. I stood up slowly and walked to the bathroom. The light was off. The sink was dry. The toilet lid was down. I checked the door. Still locked. I went to the closet and opened it. The suitcase was gone. In its place, hanging neatly on the rack, was my jacket. The one I'd worn in from the rain. I backed away from the closet, my skin crawling. I grabbed my phone and was about to call the front desk when I heard it. A soft cough. Behind me, I turned. A man was standing near the door. He was about my height, thin. His clothes were old and wrinkled, like he'd slept in them for weeks. His hair was greasy, his face unshaven. But his eyes were alert, focused. He smiled like we were old friends. "Hey," he said. "You're back early." My legs felt weak. "Who are you?" He looked confused. "This is my room," he said. "You're the one who keeps coming in and out." "That's not possible," I said. He glanced at the bed, at my bag, at the light. "You always do that. You leave your stuff. Then you go. Then you come back and pretend you don't see me." He took a step toward me. I ran. I didn't even grab my keys. I just bolted out the door and into the rain, my phone shaking in my hand as I called the police. By the time they arrived, the room was empty. No man, no suitcase, no notebook, just my jacket in the closet. The back window, however, was broken. The latch smashed inward like someone had forced it open. The officers searched the area but didn't find anyone. When I checked out the next morning, the clerk told me something that made my stomach drop. He said, "You know, you've been staying in room 17 every time you pass through here. For years." I told him I'd never been there before. He frowned and said, "You always say that. I don't stay in motels anymore. And sometimes, when I look in the mirror, I still feel like my reflection is a second behind me."